Three, two, one. Jamar Chase was clearly the rookie wide receiver one, but how long before he is the actual wide receiver one in Dynasty? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co host, Chris Allen. Chris, how are you feeling about Jamar Chase and the rest of the rookie wide receivers at this point in the season?
I think going back to our original discussion during the offseason about those rookie wide receivers, I think we pretty much nailed it. I mean, top three, and we had like debates back and forth about who's going to be in our top three. It's going to be Chase, Waddle, and Devonta Smith. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
interchange like the second two, okay, fine. But I think so far, like we nailed like the top guys. I mean, the guys that had the draft capital, they had the athletic profiles that we look for in top tier wide receivers, and then Chase being able to separate himself because we both agreed. I mean, the stuff throughout the offseason about the drops, any of that stuff, we were considering that to be noise. So I think
Right.
overall we kind of nailed it. It's just the wide receivers that went after them, whether it's the Kadarius Tonys of the world, the Amari Rodgers of the world, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore. I mean, those guys were up in the air, so it really came down to how we evaluated their situation, with which I think in each of their cases, and I'm sure we'll talk about it here in a little bit, we were kind of off on their situations as they developed over the first 5 weeks. But I think if you invested or if you stuck to your pre-draft evaluations, even took some of the advice that we provided with a slight grain of salt, I think it came out on top just by looking at like those top three guys and then trying to figure out, okay, who best fits my roster based off of the value or draft picks that you currently had, and then taking it from there.
Sure, and I didn't know that I would be so right about Jamar Chase, but I knew that we should be stubborn about him.
Mhm.
This happens with Tua, happened with Trevor Lawrence, it happens with Jamar Chase. Didn't actually happen with Kyle Pitts, but that's a different story we'll get into later. It's where you have these guys that are so good for so long and considered the best that it just gets boring, and then it becomes contrarian to start trying to rank somebody else. There was nobody in this class that was close enough to Jamar Chase to even consider at wide receiver one to me. The
Mhm.
only question is going to be, this is a debate that we're going to have in dynasty circles as a whole. Everyone, if you have one league, if you've got 50 leagues, you're going to have to start thinking, how quick am I going to react to especially wide receivers? So Juju was the wide receiver one overall very, very quickly. When he was 21 years old, he became the
Yeah.
wide receiver one overall after one good season with Antonio Brown, and then Antonio Brown left, and Juju was elevated to wide receiver one overall as a consensus ADP, and that obviously didn't work out. But that's happened a lot in the past too. Over the last 10 years, that wide receivers have been quickly elevated to wide receiver one, but then you get stuck with the bag when it doesn't work out. So then, if you're slow to react, which we've talked about on this show, when I wanted to, good example, I wanted to trade AB for Michael Thomas straight up when I felt like AB was worth more than Michael Thomas. No, too late.
Mhm.
So it's really difficult. Do I jump the ship and rank a wide receiver one too early, or do I wait and I just don't get that player? So if you're thinking like, okay, I've got Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson were on the same team, and Jamar Chase was the better of the two, and do I try to make that swap? Because you could probably trade Justin Jefferson for like maybe, I don't know, maybe Jamar Chase in a third or something, but
Maybe.
and maybe not. I mean, maybe people are already, it might already be too late. It might already be that Antonio Brown for Michael Thomas, not non-swap for
Mhm.
those two. So when are you too early on that? So Jamar Chase is not my wide receiver one yet, uh, but at this rate, I don't think it's going to be very long. Probably by the end of the year, he would probably be considered the wide receiver one. And the narrative that's keeping him from being wide receiver one is the type of touchdowns he's scoring, because he's scoring touchdowns in a way that we didn't necessarily believe he would. He's maybe not getting separation, but he's catching those deep balls, and he's coming down with basically every 50-50 ball that's thrown his way. So it seems as though those chunk plays are um, they're inconsistent, or he's going to regress. But it's been 5 weeks now, and we've seen those chunk plays every single week. Even when Joe Burrow seems to be injured, even with and without T. Higgins, it does not matter. Jamar
Mhm.
Chase is clearly the wide receiver one, and he's clearly doing it in that way, which is a good transition to our wide receiver two and Jalen Waddle. I didn't know that Jalen Waddle was going to be prime Jarvis Landry to start out. I would not have guessed that that was going to be how he was utilized as like a PPR monster. And we said that you could probably flip flop Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle, and we're not going to argue with you. I still feel that way after week 5. What do you think about those two?
So between Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle, I guess my personal preference would lean towards the guy that they're going to with the larger target share, or just the targets that we know wind up producing well for
Hmm.
fantasy, because Jalen Waddle has been kind of pigeonholed as a slot receiver. We saw some of that coming, especially given how he was used like throughout training camp. We saw just like bits and pieces of him more or less pigeonholed in that slot, because we saw Devontae Parker being on the outside, maybe Will Fuller also being on the outside, Waddle being the guy that was put in on the interior. And while the volume has certainly been there, like for Waddle, I think a 20 to 21% target share, like through the first like 5 weeks of the season. I mean, it's more or less been born out of necessity with Parker being injured, Will Fuller on
Hmm.
IR, Mike Gesicki really not doing as much as we expected. So it's just they're kind of stuck with Waddle at this point. So, and even with him playing with a backup quarterback, the opportunity has been there, but the production, we're expecting to see more, or at least we would like to see more from a productive standpoint. But if you're kneecapped by your quarterback play, then there's
Right.
nothing much more we can do. So I think I'm still bullish on Waddle and his prospects moving forward. The hope is just that the Miami Dolphins can at least wind up finding a little bit more consistent play at quarterback, and then everything should be okay.
I feel as though Devonta Smith is the more valuable of the two right now. And I think I might lean Devonta Smith just given the team situation and the quarterback situation being more certain. But I'm not completely out on Tua. And if it's not Tua, then it might be Deshaun Watson. So
Mhm.
you could be buying Waddle on a little bit of a dip right now because he's playing with Jacoby Brissett and he's not being necessarily utilized in the way that we thought he could. We knew he was kind of going to be in the slot the way that they were using him in camp, but I didn't know that they weren't going to have like explosive plays or design plays to him or more handoffs. I thought they would use him a little bit more like I don't know maybe how we think Visca should be used, something like that. But
Mhm.
he's more like just a Jarvis Landry, is kind of how he's playing. And I love Jarvis Landry for what he was, but he's never going to have a ton of value like that. So while we might rank Waddle as two, it's pretty safe to say that Devonta Smith is the more valuable of the two. And it might be a good time to flip the two as well if you
Yeah,
have Devonta Smith.
I think so. And it's not to say that Jalen Waddle couldn't garner a larger share of
Hmm.
of those air yards or even be used in an explosive manner down the field. It's just that again, he's kind of hamstrung by the quarterback play. If you're playing with a quarterback in Jacoby Brissett who has what an adjusted yards per attempt of around like
I
five, like
don't
low
even
six,
low.
yeah, so it's just I don't think it's not him being unable to do it. It's just that he can't do it, or he's not being asked
Right.
to do it, just given the confines of his offense. Where with Devonta Smith, he is being asked to run those routes. He is being asked or being used like pretty much all over the field, because where's the target competition for Devonta Smith? We're not really expecting at least a ton from Jalen Rager. Quez Watkins has had like splash plays like here and there.
Right.
So even Greg Ward has popped up, but it's just there's a pretty massive separation, even subjectively, from a tier perspective between Devonta Smith and the rest of the dudes on the target tree, like for Philadelphia. Whereas Jalen Waddle, if all things being equal, like if all the players were healthy, there would be at least like some, I would say, obscurity for what his role was going to be. If you've got Devontae Parker still there, Will Fuller being healthy, I mean, I think Waddle would fit in there, but it's just he's not commanding the same amount of targets as Devonta Smith would.
I think Will Fuller, as a side note, is probably going to end up taking another deal with the Dolphins because this was his
Mm,
1 year prove it deal that got hamstrung,
yeah, literally.
literally, literally, no pun intended. Um, so I think he actually ends up eating into Waddle for another year. That's just my personal opinion because he took the prove it deal. They like him there, and he hasn't got to prove anything.
Right.
But the next one was the hardest one, in my opinion, the hardest decision to make. Before Rashod Bateman got injured, I thought this was easy. I thought Rashod Bateman was easily fourth, and I thought he was the last wide receiver that belonged in the first round, even perhaps in superflex leagues. Maybe, maybe not, but at least 201 probably. And he had the injury, and Rondale Moore has had easy cases against him every week except for this week. So he's been getting his touch rate is impeccable when compared to a snap count, but this is the first week that he's gotten good snap count, good touch rate, great opportunity. I think 3 handoffs even. So this is a really, really tough decision point for me. I think I think keeping Rashod Bateman at wide receiver 4 is probably just stubborn because now we know what you're going to get from Rondale Moore, and it's growing. And you're not really sure what you're going to get from Rashod Bateman, but you do know what you're going to get from the Ravens offense. Now, I will point out the Ravens offense from a passing perspective is better than we thought it was going to be.
Mhm.
And that's a good thing because that means they adapted. Everyone's always said, "Oh, eventually someone's going to figure out Lamar, or eventually Lamar's going to get older and he's not going to be able to run like that forever." Okay, well now he's putting up 300 yards or whatever a game. So we know that there's dimensions to that game, and that might provide a buying opportunity for Rashod Bateman. Because yes, we haven't seen Rashod Bateman, which is why his price is probably low or discounted. But we have seen what the offense has done without him, and I've been pretty happy with it. I haven't been happy with the 2 huge drops that Marquise Brown. Actually, it was 3, but they were on the same drive, so he could only get one of them. But I wasn't happy with the 2 drops that Marquise Brown had that didn't pad Lamar Jackson's stats. But I don't know. I don't know that Rashod Bateman's going to drop those passes, So maybe now's a good buying opportunity for Rashod Bateman, and maybe the Ravens want a little more out of their wide receiver group now that they know they can throw the ball.
It's possible, and I think that's where it's going to be difficult for anybody to be kind of shaken off of their early season priors. I mean, of
Mhm.
course, folks that are listening to this, I mean, we're trying to caveat all of this with it's just week 5, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
we have multiple years ahead of us for each of these wide receivers, at least theoretically.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully.
while we are trying to at least look at them from with this like small picture view, I mean, we're not necessarily saying that you can just extrapolate all this out to this for the rest of their careers or even the
Yep.
rest of the season, to be quite honest. It's just now trying to square our preseason evaluations, off-season evaluations with what we've seen so far through these first like 4 to 5 weeks. And with Rondale Moore, I think it's important to understand that even before the season started, we did know that he was going to be in a, let's say, crowded wide receiver room, but
Hmm.
it was just what type of competition for targets was he going to have? I mean, most folks came into this thinking that AJ Green was dust. Christian Kirk was essentially just a role player. He couldn't even really do much more when it was him and Andy Isabella being a part of that offense. And
Hmm.
now everybody is flourishing
Yep.
within the Arizona Cardinals offense. So it was just a shift in the situation. There's no shift in Rondale Moore's talent. I mean, he
Hmm.
had one of like the best sideline grabs that pretty much anybody has seen in the league, like throughout for the first like 5 weeks of the season. So it's not a shift in talent, it's just a shift in situation. So I think folks need to understand that. It's the same thing for Rashod Bateman. It was, yes, like we really love his talent, his efficiency, route running capability, but then we looked at his situation. Lamar Jackson, Baltimore passing offense,
Hmm.
31st, 32nd at neutral passing rate the past 2-3 seasons since Lamar Jackson has become the quarterback. But now also another shift in situation. Lamar Jackson averaging over 300 yards passing, 2 straight games. I mean, adjusted yards per attempt, also up for career highs for Lamar Jackson. So, I mean, that passing game, if that is going to be let's say, not necessarily a massive volume like aerial attack, but if that's going to be a passing attack that needs a second or third option, like in that game, because what Sammy Watkins has been consistent.
Hmm.
Let's see, Marquise Brown has been up and down. So they need that like third or fourth element, like within that offense. And Bateman fits that role exactly. So it's like for both Rondale Moore and Rondale Moore and Rashod Bateman, they both fit in those roles. It's just like we need to see more volume or more opportunity, especially for Bateman since he hasn't even taken the field yet. He's
Right.
expected to in week 6. So I think that's where it'd be difficult to be able to put together an offer without adding more to it or having to add more to it because both are there. They're on the cusp of being able to produce, or at least their situations are conducive to them being able to produce, but just we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen them take on that full load. So I'd be surprised to see folks being able to get deals done with them as the centerpiece of a trade just because of that consistent volume, or at least fairly consistent volume we're starting to see for Rondale Moore, and you just haven't seen it yet from Bateman.
Sure. And with Rashod Bateman's situation, you mentioned Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins is good for an NFL team. He's always good for an NFL team. He gets so much flack in fantasy because he's never going to live up to when he was the 101,
Yeah.
but he's always good for an NFL team. And you also have, but that's a 1 year deal. And then you also have Marquise Brown, who's doing quite well in real life and fantasy, despite the drops. So they could both be argued crowded. It's just, is Baltimore, you mentioned it's only 5 weeks in, so I don't have the answer for this yet. I just think that Rashod Bateman was the better prospect, but I don't know if Baltimore's here to stay as a passing team. They're still averaging 100 yards on the ground a week. They're just also adding 300 in the passing game. So it's really difficult to say. And that really goes back to, hey, it's only been 5 weeks and we haven't even seen Rashod Bateman. So if you have to make the decision, do you want to make the decision because Rondale Moore is doing very well and kudos to him?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to make the decision that, look, 5 weeks ago, I thought Rashod Bateman could be a legitimate wide receiver one when he comes back from this injury, which we are glad that he's seemingly taking 2 extra weeks that he didn't need to take. That's good for his career and his future. So I think I stick with Rashod Bateman and then Rondale Moore. And then we'll just clump the next grouping together. We've got Elijah Moore, who we're pretty disappointed in at this point. You've got your Terrace Marshall, who's been fine, right? And then you have the 3 that we spent a lot of time going back and forth on: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Rodgers, and then of course Kadarius Toney, who he made us eat crow this week. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you gonna say? We have him ranked. We had him, maybe still have him ranked behind Amon-Ra St. Brown and Amari Rodgers. And hey, how many times this season did I say he's a first round wide receiver? This is weird, but we're still going to rank them this way. So, what do you think about those 3?
Well, I think with each of those guys, it's the same. I'm approaching this with the same process that I did for whether it was like Rashod Bateman, whether it was Rondale Moore, like just looking at their shift in situation, because nothing's really changed from a talent perspective, at least like our pre-draft evaluations from a talent perspective for either of these wide receivers. Kadarius Toney, we noted during our discussion, first round talent, like there's no doubt about it. The athleticism, like how he was able to produce in college, that quick twitch ability that he showed like in college, all of that was there. It's just one, the competition for targets within that offense. And then also we had some questions about the quarterback. And now situation has obviously changed. I mean, what's the phrase? Necessity is the mother of all invention. If you wind up losing Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard for 2 weeks straight, what do you think is going to happen to Tony's like target share? So the question though remains, is he now going to be a consistent part of that offense? Now he's been able to show with how many targets did he have? 13 targets just yesterday? Is he now going to be a more consistent part of that offense moving forward? Is he now going to be demanding targets alongside Sterling Shepard, who also plays in the same area of the field? Now, if that happens, then absolutely. Now we're talking about a first round wide receiver, at least a wide receiver that we all would have been more excited about going back to like March, April, May timeframe. It's just now the situation has shifted. And I think that's where we need to at least keep that context in mind, because scrolling through Twitter yesterday, watching that game, I saw so many people accepting their L's on Kadarius Toney, myself included. I mean, I did not really see this coming from him. I mean, we saw glimpses of it the week prior, but it's just now that seeing this in full force. Now, of course, he wound up punching a dude and getting ejected from the game, but that's a whole other thing. We'll see if he winds up in Joe Judge's doghouse like afterwards. But I think that's the part that we need to square, is that there was no change in talent. There was nobody knew that this was in the range of outcomes for Toney. The athleticism was always there. It's just the opportunity that wasn't there. It was difficult to see how in an offense with Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, even Evan Ingram, how does Toney wind up seeing the field? Well, if you get off like at least 3 out of those 4 injured, even Kenny Golladay wound up leaving the game, then of course, yes, we wind up seeing it. So the question is, what's that path for him moving forward? I mean, situation shift for Amari Rodgers too. Beginning of the offseason, excited about his prospects like moving forward. We're not really crowning Allen Lazard as the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in that offense, like the slot king or anything like that. But then after Aaron Rodgers gets granted like GM powers, brings Randall Cobb back, it's like, so now what are we expected to do like with his situation? So I think that's where Elijah Moore, same deal. I mean, he gets concussed. What are we supposed to do? Also, they wind up losing 2 offensive linemen throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. So that situation changes. So I think that's where we need to at least try and look at, okay, so what were we doing pre-draft that's now, or what were we thinking about pre-draft that's now different than what we're looking at here in week 5? And if the talent hasn't changed, like Elijah Moore still coming back from the concussion this past week, so that like nothing about his talent has changed. And we'll assume, at least I would like to assume, that his opportunity is going to get back to what we at least saw at the beginning of the season. But if the talent hasn't changed through week 5 for most of these rookies, I'm not trying to change too much about my valuation of them moving forward, because I still have questions about Toney's situation. I still have questions about Elijah Moore's situation, like moving forward. So I think that's where we need to at least take a pause and say that we were absolutely wrong. Okay. I mean, I have a little bit of pushback on that.
I'm not taking a full L yet.
Yeah, I'm not taking a full L yet.
I'll take a lowercase L for now.
Yeah, and I think that's where we just need to go back and look at their situations and see, all right, well, what's changed in order to get them out there? And I think that's where some compromise that we can have on some of these later round guys.
Yep. And the thing about this grouping that's tough is that we haven't seen a lot of any of them. For various reasons. So we'll touch on Elijah Moore first. His opportunity is going to go up, and he had a couple plays where he was wide open yesterday, and Zach Moss just didn't get him. So I think it's going to be there for Elijah Moore. It's a great point that somebody made that I might pay a little more attention to in the future, is that New York media is just an echo chamber because they have twice the amount of media coverage in camps, in mini camps, etc. And honestly, great point, because all I saw on my timeline was Elijah Moore. So like you had to rank him where we ranked him, which was like wide receiver 6, I think. And maybe he wasn't that much more impressive than Terrace Marshall. So you never really know with that. You don't know. All we know is what the beat reporters put out. I can't tell that 60 beat reporters commented on the same play that Elijah Moore made. So he did get a huge pump this offseason, and maybe we bet, maybe we didn't. I think he's still going to be productive in that offense. Terrace Marshall's just been steady. He's fine. He's not taking over. Even Robbie Anderson's not getting the target share that we thought he was going to get, and we're still not seeing Terrace Marshall necessarily take over. Still fine with that ranking. The 3 that we have to discuss probably over the rest of the year and the next coming years, Amari Rodgers, I still want him on like all my teams. Randall Cobb's going to be there for 1 year. Who knows what happens next year, but maybe Amari Rodgers grows with Jordan Love, and we see that Randall Cobb, Aaron Rodgers connection, but with Love and Amari Rodgers. So I still want Amari Rodgers on my team. The problem, Monroe St. Brown, the point that I made over and over is that he still needs to be good. We knew he was going to get a ton of targets. We knew that he looked good in camp. He still needed to be good. And it's starting to appear that he's just not, which is fine. He's a 4th round rookie. Their hit rate is minuscule. So, and even at the time of those rankings, I said probably not a good idea to have him ranked here. And I don't know if I'm changing it yet, but still probably not a good idea to have him ahead of Kadarius Toney. Now, Kadarius Toney. I went to bat for Kadarius Toney when we very reluctantly advised it's probably a good time to go trade for him now. If you're ever going to have Kadarius Toney on your roster, when we talked about it 2 weeks ago was the time. But when I said that, I said, maybe the shoe thing's not a real problem. Maybe the family thing's not a real problem, blah, blah, blah. All these things added up that seemed like maybe these aren't real problems and you guys are just piling on the guy. Well, in his first game that he gets, prime treatment because no one else is there to play football, he hits somebody. He accidentally headbutts a teammate. Did he fumble? I thought he fumbled, or maybe it was a drop. But either way, he was a whirlwind out there, and I'm thinking, maybe I was wrong about that. maybe those things that were adding up, not in Kadarius Toney's favor over the offseason. Maybe he is an actual problem for the organization. So I don't know if that's going to result in some sort of doghouse with Joe Judge, but it certainly wasn't helpful that the first game that you come in and you absolutely dominate with 13 catches and like 189 yards, you also get yourself ejected. So we'll see how that pans out when the rest of the team is back to play football. But I don't think there should have been many L's or W's claimed besides, Kadarius Toney's a playmaker, still drafted into a terrible situation, still drafted into a terrible organization. They're not going to pay their quarterback. They're not going to get a low enough draft pick to draft a quarterback. They're either going to pay Saquon Barkley and put themselves in a cap problem, or they're not going to have Saquon Barkley and their offense is going to be worse. So Kadarius Toney, still terrible situation, still an electric player.
Yep. I think that's it. It really is. That's it. Because and that's for each of those guys. And I think that's really where we shouldn't become prisoners of the moment with his week 5 performance without really contextualizing the situation that he found himself in. And while we all knew pre-draft that he was a good athlete, that he was capable of making some of the runs that he did. It's just that his situation with the competition for targets on the Giants, it made it difficult for us to see like what is that path for him to get targets on a week in, week out basis. So even after all of this, if things go back to Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Evan Ingram on the field together, would anybody be like, I mean, really surprised? Or even if his snaps drop down to where Rondale Moore is at,
Sure.
with a 30 to 40%, 40% snap share, would anybody be really surprised?
Right.
So it's just, I think that's where we at least need to, I mean, if we're going to question small sample sizes for bad performances, we should also do the same for good performances as well. And also good performances that happen when half of the, or like 3/4 of the pass catchers you typically play with are injured.
Excellent point. So this is the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde. This is Chris Allen, and we come to you from the email list every week. The email list comes from Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, keep you up to date on all the news and notes from around the league each week. So instead of you having to get the notifications from the ESPN app or from MFL, and half the time those might not come through, you can get one email that catches you all the way up. That is the email list. That is from footballguys.com. And then we take our news and notes straight from that. If it's got dynasty relevance, we talk about it with you. So Kadarius Toney wasn't the only rookie that had his breakout game. This rookie was not a wide receiver, even though people want to say that he is. Kyle Pitts had a phenomenal game in London, and he was, a hot topic all offseason. Should he go first overall? Even in Superflex, some people were going to first overall. Even in non-tight end premium, people were taking Kyle Pitts first overall. So if Kyle Pitts was ranked with just our wide receivers and no running backs or quarterbacks, where would Kyle Pitts fall for you amongst the wide receivers?
I would say probably 3, 4.
Okay.
So somewhere behind. So I'd probably put it Chase, Devonta Smith, and then probably Pitts like shortly thereafter. Just given the amount of targets we would expect for him to see, because I don't want to get trapped in this week 5 moment,
Fair.
right? Because it was Falcons versus the Jets. Let's keep that in perspective. Now, like the Jets defense as a whole, the defensive front has been like very good this season so far. Secondary hasn't been too terribly bad, but either way, they were facing the Jets. Mm-hmm. And then also, again, with the same thing that we just talked about with Kadarius Toney. Calvin Ridley not there. Russell Gage, like, while nobody's like caring a ton about Russell Gage, but if you've got your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, target. Right. So if both of your top pass catchers, like typically starting pass catchers on your team, are also out, and he's left in a situation where it's just him, of course his targets are going to increase. Of course his production is going to increase. So we all knew Kyle Pitts. I mean, wide receiver, tight end hybrid, depending on the debate that you want to get yourself into. We knew that he was electric with the ball. We knew that he was also capable of being able to beat either just a corner coverage or whether he's like matched up on a linebacker or safety for whichever reason. Like we knew all that was in his range of outcomes. So seeing that confirms what we all knew to be true. So I'm not going to just summarily boost his ranking just because of this. At the very least, we should expect Calvin Ridley to be a large part of that offense moving forward after they get back from London. So should we push him up even higher than Devonta Smith, who's already through 5 weeks garnered a 45% market share of the air yards in his offense? Jamar Chase, who scored like just ridiculous touchdowns on a weekly basis and also commanding
breaking Randy Moss's records.
Right. So it's just, I can't move him past at least those 2 wide receivers. But if you want to talk about moving him past, Waddle and any of the other first round rookies that we had discussed, absolutely. But I think that's where I draw the line.
So I'll take Kyle Pitts second. It feels like a trap putting him ahead of Chase. I understand positional scarcity, and I understand how big of a deal it is to have an elite tight end. Maybe you do have an elite tight end for 10 years, but the part that Kyle Pitts will not acknowledge is that this is a fork in the road, and there's 2 paths. Both of them are going to be good, but one is TJ Hawkinson. So he could produce like TJ Hawkinson in his first year, and I would say, wow, Kyle Pitts is really good. But if he produces like if Kyle Pitts produces like TJ Hawkinson for the people who are so in love with Kyle Pitts, that's a letdown. That's not fair to Kyle Pitts. TJ Hawkinson was a heck of a prospect. Heck, Noah Fant was a heck of a prospect. Both of them were top 15 picks. Yes, I understand TJ Hawkinson went 9 and Kyle Pitts went 4. If the Lions had the 4th overall pick that year, we don't know that they weren't going to take TJ Hawkinson.
Sure.
He landed at 9, whatever. They're both top 10 tight ends. TJ Hawkinson's a heck of a player, heck of a prospect, heck of an athlete. That's another thing that people don't like to compare Kyle Pitts to TJ Hawkinson for whatever reason. No, TJ Hawkinson's a fantastic athlete and a fantastic receiver in his own right. So I'll be super happy having Kyle Pitts ranked right behind Jamar Chase, even if he just produces as TJ Hawkinson. And if you acknowledge that there's an even higher ceiling there, then okay, I'll put him ahead of Devonta Smith, because if I'm not sure that I want Devonta Smith over Jalen Waddle, I definitely want Kyle Pitts over Jalen Waddle. So that's how I make those things work in my head. But I'm gonna say you're gonna regret if you ranked Kyle Pitts over Jamar Chase.
Oh yeah, because just looking over the track record of tight end usage on a weekly basis, or even a seasonal basis, like moving forward, are we going to, I guess, summarily say that Kyle Pitts is going to be getting a similar workload to, let's say, like Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, even like, is that the expectation for him moving forward? I think he should be somewhere close to that. But is Arthur Smith going to be using him that way? Heck, we saw Lee Smith and Hayden Hurst getting downfield targets just yesterday too. So I don't know. Let's keep it all in context. But but of course, Kyle Pitts, we expected him to be able to do well on Sunday without having Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, like so on and so forth. He did that, but let's not push him higher than what he, at least as compared to the wide receivers. So I do think, somewhere in like that 2-3 range, like in the wide receiver range.
Sure. All right. Well, we're 5 weeks in, and you're at a time where it's time to start making some decisions. You're either going to make some trades and you're going to push, or you're going to have to start maybe concede. Who knows? But the worst thing you can do is do all the work on your own when you have the League Dominator app that you could be using. So head over to iOS, Android, wherever you get your applications on your phone. If you like the content on our mobile site, super clean, love the mobile site. But if you like that content and you want to get it on your phone, you get a lot of the same stuff if you just download the League Dominator app. Just plug in your league and you'll get all kinds of advice on waiver wires, etc., that comes out every week. So check out League Dominator on iOS or Android. Somebody that I wanted to mention for dynasty purposes is Curtis Samuel. He's got another growing injury, which I understand is he probably shouldn't have been back already, to be honest with you. I always hate when I see coaches say we're going to sprinkle him in. If you have to sprinkle him in practice. You don't need to sprinkle him in a game where people don't care if he has a growing injury. They're going to hit him all the same. So probably not a great idea, whatever, not an NFL head coach. What I do know is that Curtis Samuel's only 25. He's got a big multi-year contract with Washington. I would like to think that their quarterback situation is going to improve sometime in the near future. Not positive about that, but you would think it would have to. I mean, Taylor Heineke's doing fine. Fitzmagic is Fitzmagic. It's not too hard to upgrade from either of those two. So that being said, Curtis Samuel's probably about as cheap as he's going to get. And we were really excited about him this offseason when he signed with Washington, and he was a valuable dynasty commodity. His value just keeps going down and down. If you think that people are going to double count this growing injury, even though it's just the same injury he was already dealing with, it might be time to throw some trade offers out for Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, absolutely would, because let's put Curtis Samuel aside. Just let's not even look at the injury perception related to his value at this point. Let's look at Washington's offense as a whole. Like, who is their wide receiver 2 at this point?
Sure.
Well, honestly, I don't think is everybody flocking towards Adam Humphries?
It's got to be Diami, but we didn't even mention him in our last segment. So
exactly. So we're not flocking to any of the other options outside of Terry McLaurin. I mean, Logan Thomas is on IR at this point. So, I mean, if we're not enthusiastic about the current pass catchers on Washington's team outside of McLaurin, then yes, I think Curtis Samuel should be a buy at this point. But then, as you mentioned, I mean, the contract that he's currently got right now, if I'm remembering correctly, Washington doesn't have a potential out on his contract until 2023.
I think so. It's a 3-year.
Right. So at the very least, his cap hit is like well over like 5, 6, 7 million, like even in like 2023. So you've at least got 2 years to hold on to him. If folks are getting nervous, I think he would be a good buy low at this point, because again, like I mentioned, if we're not enthusiastic about any of the current pass catchers outside Terry McLaurin, like why not take a shot on him and see what happens if he winds up getting time to rest that groin injury? If he needs surgery, winds up missing even more time or whatever the case may be, at least you have a pass catcher on that offense that should be able to walk into some opportunity the moment they hit the field.
And another thing is that he is only 25, so he came into the league really young. At only 25, I think that was a strategic measure for he and his agent that he would be 28 when he hit free agency again, prime wide receiver age. So really, you could be getting 5 years out of him. For dynasty purposes, we could see him relevant for 5 more years, and I don't think we've actually seen the peak from him. If Washington's going to use him the way that he was utilized last year, then he's going to be a very, very hot dynasty commodity that nobody's really excited for right now. But you're going to get instant return on investment from him as soon as he's finally back healthy.
Yeah, I think so.
So we've got a bunch of great shows over on the YouTube channel. Please go over there, like, subscribe, rate, review. Make sure you hit the notification bell. And as Cecil likes to say, sometimes the bell unclicks itself. So make sure that you're still subscribed and you still like the bell. I know we have the mailback show on Wednesday. So if you have any questions, you can submit that over to Dave Kluge, or you could go and ask Victoria. So Troy as well. So if you want any questions answered on that show on Wednesdays live, then go over and ask them on Twitter your question. Make sure that you put in your league details and etc. so that they can give you quality answers for that. But that's one of the many shows that we offer over on the Football Guys YouTube channel. Last thing we want to get into today is Michael Carter. I felt like this was a good time to bring this up because he might be trending in a direction where his price is going to elevate very soon. So if he is the type of player that you wanted to invest in, now would probably be the time to invest in him. He wasn't a world burner. There was a lot of things on Sunday that you could say were negative for him. So Ty Johnson, for example, getting the first goal line touch, the first goal line series was probably a negative. You still got Tevin Coleman getting a little bit of work in that backfield, also probably a negative. However, there are plenty of positives in Michael Carter's game that say he's trending towards probably never a workhorse role, but a better role than he's got now.
Right. And I think that's where we need to, again, keep everything in context. Let's keep it all in front of us. But his workload has been at least increasing or staying fairly steady over the first 5 weeks of the season. If I'm remembering correctly, offensive snaps have been trending up. Also, his RB touch share has been trending up as it looks like they're starting to phase Tevin Coleman out. They did swap, him and Ty Johnson wound up swapping red zone series, so he wound up getting his score. But I think the big thing, and this is where the buy low opportunity still presents itself, nobody has really separated themselves, and this is where the uncertainty presents the buying opportunity for dynasty managers, in that I don't see the same roles or skill sets, or just the pigeonholing of skill sets that we do in San Francisco, where we're all assuming Robert Saleh is getting a lot of the offensive concepts for their particular scheme they're running with New York. So with Kyle Shanahan's offense, we've got, the Elijah Mitchells, the Trey Sermons, Jeff Wilsons, Kyle Juszczyks. I mean, each of them fill a specific bucket. We don't see that in New York. While Ty Johnson, he might have that power runner type of thing to him. Michael Carter might be a little bit more useful in the passing game. Even if Tevin Coleman were a larger part of that offense, really, could he be, if he was a little bit younger, could he be the speedster type, the one that can actually use some of his bursts, which he doesn't really have at this point. But still, they don't have those niche pieces of that offense. So really, it comes down to two guys. I'm not expecting Tevin Coleman to be there for the long haul, at least for my money, not past this season. So it comes down to those two guys, and Michael Carter has at least shown himself through 5 weeks to be at least useful in both the rushing and passing game. So I do think that anybody wants to try and buy in on this offense being productive, which I think it can be. I think they've shown at least enough elements there, and they do have at least the parts and pieces along the offensive line and the passing game that they could sustain at least a decent offense. They just need Zach Wilson to kind of pick things up a bit, not be as slow on offense as they have been so far. But either way, I think Michael Carter does present a buy low opportunity for managers that are looking to get at least a piece of that offense, which I think could be productive moving forward.
Yeah, the problem the reason it's a buying opportunity, because if this were a squeaky clean, like obvious analysis, then there's no buying opportunity. People are just excited to have Michael Carter. The reason there's a buying opportunity is because Ty Johnson, with his usage, could easily outscore Michael Carter by the end of the season, which would be incredibly frustrating. Nobody invested in Ty Johnson the same way they've invested in Michael Carter. So that would be very frustrating, especially since Ty Johnson's not viewed as a long-term dynasty prospect and Michael Carter is. So
Mhm.
that's still a possibility, but it's trending very close to a 50-50 um, between Carter and Johnson. So we want to get to that before it's a 50-50, and then we want to hope that Michael Carter makes it 60-40. And
Mhm.
he has demonstrated that he can do some early down work. He got the goal line series as well. So Ty Johnson got a goal line series and scored. Michael Carter got a goal line series and scored. So obviously they can both do it. That's kind of what Robert Saleh wants to do. He wants the guys that don't pigeonhole into any role, because then he can do whatever he wants with the offense without giving anything away. So we're probably pretty close to having no Tevin Coleman, unfortunately for me and my best ball shares, and being mostly Michael Carter and mostly Ty Johnson, and then hopefully Michael Carter just takes over. But it's probably another week away from that. So it's probably a good week to put out some feelers and just say, I think Michael Carter after this weekend could get a 60-40 split of that backfield. Like you said, backfield's probably going to, actually, the whole offense is probably going to trend up. It's not, I was watching that game on Sunday. Zach Wilson's not there yet. That's for sure. And he shouldn't have been the second overall pick. But most of us knew that except for the Jets. But it does look like it can be an exciting offense. I wish they would get Zach Wilson moving into a different launch point more often, because that's where he's been excelling with those crazy accurate passes when he's on the boot. So they need to get a little bit more creative, but you don't know how much they're pulling back because he's not there yet. So maybe the whole offense is a buy low opportunity, because they have the pieces, and they actually have solid pieces at every position, even at offensive line, which is so weird to say about the Jets.
Right. And I think that's where it's just we need to see it all kind of come together for both Zach Wilson, the offensive line, the wide receivers, because each have been pretty much banged up at some point throughout the season so far. And it's only been 5 weeks. The offensive line, they lost ABT at one point, like early on
Yeah.
in the season. Jamison Crowder was hurt. Also, so it's just Elijah Moore through the concussion protocol. So they've had like injuries at each piece. So they haven't really gotten like the whole squad together,
Right.
where Zach Wilson has been able to kind of utilize the entire field in order to like generate some offensive production. I think Matt Waldman put out like a quick hit video on Zach Wilson, and that his mind is processing too quick for his body to actually be able to complete some of the passes, like see the read and actually be able to execute that read as well, like from a offensive passing perspective. So hopefully things slow down for him. They can get a little bit more in rhythm, and they're not forced into some of these like close games that's been like the one against the Titans a couple of
Right.
weeks ago, this one this past week. So hopefully things start to slow down a bit for him, and then we can start to see like all of it start to click for him. And that's where that backfield, I mean, since both Ty Johnson and Michael Carter are used in the passing game, I think that's where that production come from. So back to our original point. I mean, Michael Carter presents a buy low opportunity, because we can see how that offense can be more productive moving forward. And I think that's where now's the time to kind of buy into that.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, and comment. Those comments really help us out with the YouTube overlord algorithms, as Cecil likes to say. And we will catch you all next time.
Peace.